eyes, dumbass.
It is Christmas Eve 2022. Dan is a former military sergeant turned teacher, and he should be home helping his wife Emmy and daughter Murray with the holiday. Instead, he is outside on the phone chasing a research lab job he desperately wants. The rejection comes quickly. He goes back inside, sits with Murray, and tells her to do what nobody else is willing to do. That evening, the family watches a soccer match that is interrupted when a glowing cloud of smoke and electricity tears open on the field and soldiers step out of it. They are led by Lieutenant Hart, and their message is simple and devastating. They come from 2051. An alien species called the White Spikes has invaded Earth. Most of humanity is dead, and they need people from the present to come fight. Countries begin sending soldiers as fast as they can. It is never enough. Only 1 in 4 who go ever return. When trained soldiers run out, the government starts drafting civilians. Riots break out. Dan's students stare at him with empty eyes. One boy, Martin, never stops talking about volcanoes. Then Dan gets drafted. He reports to the facility, passes the tests, which are measuring whether he will be alive in 7 years, and he will not be, and has a tracker device attached to his arm that will bring him home after 7 days in the future. He tells Emmy. She says they should run. He points to the tracker. She tells him to go see his father. Dan has not spoken to James since childhood, when James walked out, but he goes anyway and asks for help. James assumes he was sent by the government, and the conversation collapses. Dan goes home empty-handed and promises Emmy he will come back. At the training facility, he meets Charlie, a nervous scientist, and Dorian, a fighter on his third tour who carries himself like a man who has already made peace with dying. They receive basic training and an explanation of how the time link works. 2 fixed points on a moving river, 2022 and 2051. No shortcuts. They are still in the barracks when the alarm goes off. The future cannot schedule when it needs help. The cloud swallows them. Something goes wrong with the coordinates, and they materialize in the sky above Miami. Most die on impact. The survivors fall into a rooftop pool, swim out, and find the city in complete ruin. A colonel contacts them. The city is overrun, jets are coming to bomb it, and a research team is trapped in a laboratory. She puts Dan in charge, and he moves the group through the wreckage. Inside the lab, they find a dead alien. Dorian pockets one of its claws. Deeper in, the research team is dead, arranged as bait. They grab every copy of the research and move. On the stairs, someone looks up and they finally see a white spike. It fires a spike from its tentacle and kills one of them instantly. Bullets slow the creatures but cannot kill them. They run. The stairwell becomes a rout.
Oh, shit.
Dorian comes back for Dan and shows him the only thing that works. Shoot for the neck or the belly. They reach the street and find the rescue tank already destroyed by white spikes. They fight in the open until survivors fall into a tunnel. Dan stops to pull out a fallen trainee. 2 others stay behind to hold the aliens off, and the jets arrive and level everything. Hours later, Dan and Charlie wake up in a forward operating base in the Dominican Republic. Dorian tells Dan the rest of the team is dead and that stopping for the fallen soldier put everyone else at risk. Then he says he has cancer and has decided he alone gets to choose when he dies. Dan is called to see the colonel. When he hears her name, he goes still. The colonel is Murray, his daughter, 30 years older, the lead scientist of a division called the R Force that she built herself. She is cold and professional because she has not come to reunite with her father. She needs his help. She shows him footage of a female white spike, rarer, more aggressive, nests underground. The males die to protect her without hesitation. Murray's toxin kills the males, but the females survived it. She needs to capture one alive, study her DNA, and engineer something stronger. She needs Dan on the extraction team. The helicopters fly out and Murray fills Dan in. The white spikes appeared in Russia in 2048, invisible to every satellite and radar system. In 3 years, they controlled the world. They want humans as food and nothing else. Dan asks what happened to him before he died. Murray says it is better not to go there. At the nest, soldiers are already struggling to hold down the female. She is enormous and killing everyone she can reach. Murray lands a shot to her neck, ropes go around the alien, and she is forced into a cage and onto a helicopter. She screams, and the males swarm from every direction. Dan opens fire to cover the helicopters while he and Murray escape by jeep, fighting their way out until they can stop and send up a flare. Murray tells him what she remembers. When she was 12, his depression over not working on the things he wanted hit him so hard he left. When she was 16, he was in a car accident, and she was at the hospital when he died. Dan has nothing to say. He can see exactly how he became his father, and somewhere in a recognition, he finds an unexpected window into why James is the way he is. The female is taken to a fortified offshore oil platform, chained and sedated continuously. Dan and Maury spend days in a lab together, mapping the alien's DNA, trying to understand how she neutralizes the toxin. The work is slow, and the time lets them talk again. The night before Dan's time link brings him home, he tells her he is proud of her, and that Emmy would have been proud too. Maury finally explains why she really brought him here. Once the stronger toxin is finished, he needs to take it back to 2022 and mass produce it so it is ready before the aliens arrive. She has been working through the night because she has to finish before he leaves. The machine completes a toxin with a 100% match for the female at exactly the wrong moment. The female wakes up and calls for her protectors. The platform is swarmed. Dan argues they should kill the female to stop the attack. Murray says the sample is too valuable. The soldiers hold as long as they can while the labs are overrun. Dan and Murray fight their way toward the helipad. Murray takes a spike to the body. She can barely walk and the platform is going down. The aliens have driven a ship into it. She tells Dan she is sorry for being cold. She tells him she loves him. She puts the toxin in his hand and tells him to save everyone. An alien drags her under just as the time link activates. Dan, Dorian, and Charlie are pulled back to 2022 with the toxin unbroken. Hart meets them. Dan tells her they need to mass produce the toxin immediately. Hart tells him the time machine is not working, the platform is destroyed, and with it the future end of the time link. Nobody is going back. Dan goes home barely able to process being there. Emmy finds him awake in the middle of the night, checking on young Murray. He tells Emmy everything. She listens and then helps him think. The aliens appeared in Russia in 2048, invisible to every detection system. Maybe they were already there, frozen under Arctic ice for thousands of years, released in 2048 because climate change finally melted enough of it. It is a theory. They have nothing else. Dan moves fast. He brings Dorian back in. He takes Dorian's claw to Charlie's lab, where analysis find volcanic ash from somewhere in China or Korea embedded in it. Asian ash and a Russian claw only make sense if it was carried by wind into the ocean and frozen into Arctic ice long ago. Dan goes to Martin, his student who never stops talking about volcanoes, who confirms a massive ancient eruption in Asia could have done exactly that. The white spikes were never invaders. They have been here the entire time, sealed under ice, waiting for the planet to warm enough to release them. The government will not help without proof. Dan goes to James and says 2 words, "I need your help." James agrees without needing the whole story. Hart brings soldiers, weapons, and copies of the toxin. They fly to Russia. At the Academy of Sciences glacier, their instruments go haywire over a section of ice. They blow a hole in the ground and climb into a cavern sealed since before recorded history. The ship is enormous and ancient and frozen solid. They cut through the ice and go in. The cockpit holds a pilot, not a white spike, something else entirely. In another chamber, the white spikes are sealed in biopods, hundreds of them. They are cargo, bioengineered weapons used to colonize planets. This ship was never meant to land here. It crashed. The team injects the pods with toxin and watches the aliens die. The untreated ones hear the dying and break free. Dorian sees what needs to happen. He gives Dan his claw, takes the bomb, and tells them to get out. James shoots escaping aliens at the surface. Charlie's gun jams, and he uses a chainsaw. Dan clears the blast radius and shouts for everyone to run. Dorian detonates the bomb and brings the ship down with him, dying exactly when and how he chose. Then James tells Dan one got out, a red belly. The Queen. They split up. The Queen finds a decoyed James assembled in snow and turns toward him instead. Dan hits her with a snowmobile, and they open fire together, pushing her to the cliff edge. She goes over, but does not die. She comes back, separates them, and drives a spike into Dan. He pulls it free and uses it on her. James buries an axe in her, leaving her blind. Dan injects the toxin into her leg. She removes the leg before it can spread. When she lunges at Dan, he arms a grenade. James raises his wounded hand and lets her smell the blood. She turns. Dan will not lose his father now. He jumps onto the queen, opens her neck with Dorian's claw, forces the last vial of toxin into her mouth, and kicks her off the cliff. She hits the rocks and dies. Newscasts report an explosion in Russia. The government claims credit. Dan flies home and walks through his front door. Emmy is there. Murray is there. James comes in behind him and meets his granddaughter for the first time.